Hey, Rogheads! Welcome back to another great and hilarious episode of Remember of Game. I can tell you for a fact that it's great and hilarious, and if you disagree, you're a fucking idiot asshole and nobody cares what you think. This week's episode is all about Ion Fury. Remember when FPS games were just video games and not lame bullshit with a mentally exhausting political agenda jam-packed into every corner of the aesthetics and character design? Or when single-player FPS games weren't just endless crap story and lame dialogue? We all know good FPS games start you off immediately killing shit. Not wandering around with some dumb assholes blabbering fake story at you so you can pretend your life isn't pointless and you're part of something bigger. Well, it's good news for anybody that's looking for a classic-style FPS because Ion Fury's gonna really tickle you. All the classic FPS games consisted of just running around, grabbing guns, and blasting losers that made fun of you at school. Don't come to Doom tomorrow, because it's going to be just like Doom.
These games are getting really realistic.
Yeah.
Don't interrupt me.
Back in the 90s, PC gaming was way more difficult than console gaming. First off, you had to turn the power on, put in the sound card, you had to print out the software license, then you had to plug in your headphones, you had to put the disc in, you had to scan for all the files, make sure everything's there. You had to adjust the monitor because you can't see any of the files. Import the movies, plug in the camcorder, import the movies again, check to see if the movies are there, grab your joystick, put the disc in, then you had to test out your joystick, take out the sound card, then you have to put the disc in, then you had to run the config file. No, not like that, dipshit. No, wrong, stupid. Okay, there you go. Then you had to put in the sound card, then you had to put your headphones on, hit the enter key, put the disc in, and now you're playing video games. With the advent of PC gaming, they could finally make the ultimate in realism gaming. School shooter sim. With the advent of PC gaming, they could finally make the ultimate in realism gaming. First-person shooters. The first FPS game ever made, of course, was John Romhack's Doom from Idiot Developer Software, or ID for short. Doom's macabre action and boner-chilling visuals set the standard, but after Doom, all FPS developers had to do something bigger and explosioner than the bloody adventures of Dumb Marine. But how could they? They had to make it more violent and more stripper. That's why Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem 3D was on a brand new game engine. 3D Realm Software knew they had to beat the Green Bomber somehow, so they licensed the build engine from developer Ken Silverman, who was only 17 years old when he modded Idiot Software with his exciting new game engine. It had all the explosions, all the interactions, and all the porno jack-offs you could want in a game. Build Engine also begat several great spin-off games such as William Shatner's Tech War and Witch Haven 2 Blood Vengeance. These games raised the bar for interactivity over the classics Doom and Wolfenstein, with great scenes such as anime hentai girl jack-off bullshit and kicking zombie heads around. Everybody loves these classic FPSs, and over the last decade or so, there's been a handful of studios bringing back this classic style. And of course, it had to come with an autistic Reddit bugman term, boomer shooters. Yeah, I get it. You know, ADHD, Adderall huffing, rootless Zoomer trash, and brain-dead neurotic Reddit weirdos absolutely have to have acutely formed categories and titles and labels for everything, so they know exactly where to file the game on their highly organized limited physical release collectard shelf, right next to their Funko Pops. My retro FPS culture isn't your Halloween costume. Well, Ion Fury gets back to the basics. It's everything you've been looking for in a classic-style FPS. Ion Fury uses an updated version of the build engine, and I think by choosing a game engine that's so limited in comparison to many other source ports of old FPS games like GZ, Doom, or Quake, it shows that this game wasn't just designed to look similar to something of that era. This was a deliberate choice to make it look, feel, and play exactly like something from that era. Voidpoint clearly know their shit, and they've pushed the build engine about as far as they possibly could to create both a technological showcase of their mastery with designing in this game engine, as well as their expertise in game design in general. What's the most important aspect of any shooter game? Probably shooting stuff, so let's talk about the guns. Back in the day, the guns in FPS games used to basically just be the classic power scaling method where the early guns get completely outclassed by the later guns, where Ion Fury instead goes for archetypal weapon classes that fill roles that you pretty much continually use throughout the entire game and switch between depending on the scenario. You got long range, close range, room clearing, around the corner, in the toilet, you name it, you got all the guns. They're all useful, they feel really satisfying to use, they play to the strengths of the action movie realism style with Asperger headshot fixation based gameplay, and tons of porno gore to jack off to when you get those sweet, sweet headshots.
The game encourages you to use your resources wisely. I never really felt starved for ammo and stuff, but you do sometimes have to ask yourself,
is this the right time to blow myself up with a cluster puck? You got the stun rod in this game instead of something more satisfying. It'd be nice if there was something like the sword from Shadow Warrior with a really gory animation of them splitting in half. The default pistol you start with is incredibly useful. It promotes good use of ammo by going for headshots. It has a really useful lock-on mode that for some reason the bullets do more damage than when you're just free firing it, which kind of annoys me. And in general, the game wants you to use this gun. It doesn't get phased out or anything, which is really nice. It's nice that you don't just have a wasted weapon slot, you have something that's continually useful, and I really appreciate that. Up next is the shotgun / grenade launcher. Shotgun's generally extremely useful. It's good at range. It can take down most of the lower tier enemies with a single shot. I tend to use it to get rid of spiders because I don't even want to bother getting close to them to smack them with the baton, which does one-shot them, but so does the shotgun. And the game just throws shotgun ammo at you constantly, so there's no reason not to use it liberally. Generally a reliable gun, and the grenade launcher is just a great room clearer. Next up, you got the submachine guns that are just, they look like G.I. Joe guns. They're really effective. If you're in a shitty situation and you're kind of cornered, but you've got some room to maneuver, these are the guns to use. You can pretty much just mag dump any high tier enemy and you will take them out. I gotta say though that these have a little bit of splash damage. Think Duke Nukem Devastator, but in submachine gun form. So if you try to point blank something and you're touching it, you're gonna kill yourself. Next up, you got the ion bow, which,
oh, it's like the game's name, Ion Fury. This is where the fury and the ions come from.
anyway, it's a combination sniper rifle and super shotgun. The primary fire shoots a straight bolt that can sometimes get fucked out on build engine slanted surfaces and cause you to fire at ridiculous angles that you're not actually aiming at. But generally speaking, it's reliable. The right click is a hold to charge up super shotgun blast that can take down tough enemies in a split second. This is probably the most devastating weapon in the game. If you hold right click for a really long time, it'll go into an overcharge mode where it just kind of dumps ammo. This is the most useful thing you can do against any problem enemy. If you do this and just circle strafe around the bosses, you delete them in a second. Next up, you got the bowling bombs. These vary between being insanely useful or just completely useless. At times, the bowling bombs seem to just have insanely perfect tracking where they'll just fly around a corner, blow up a guy, and perfectly clear a room. Other times, you'll throw 4 or 5 of them at one guy that's just milling around like a dipshit, and they won't kill him for no reason. Generally speaking, explosives in this game are insanely damaging, so the bowling bombs can be extremely good. They can also be extremely lethal to yourself. If you throw one and there's a spider jumping around and you blow yourself up, you'll just die instantly.
Die, you fucking bastard! Stupid bug killed me and ruined the run. God damn it.
Next up, you've got the other utility explosive, the cluster puck. These are really good for blowing yourself up with. I honestly find these insanely risky to use. I'm never comfortable throwing one, and I almost always feel like the little bouncing, exploding ball bearings are just gonna fly in my face and insta-kill me. The last gun you get is called the I keep forgetting I have this gun. The only time I remember that I have the minigun is anytime I see ammo pickups for it in the game and I go, oh yeah, I forgot I have the minigun. The minigun basically feels like an automatic version of the default handgun, and in that capacity, it's much more cumbersome to use, so it doesn't really feel worth it over just the pistol itself or the submachine guns. It kind of just sits at the bottom of the pile forgotten and becomes another weapon that you shoot spiders with or use when you're low on other ammo.
It's kind of cool that you get this as a reward from killing a big boss. I think it feels a little bit underwhelming in that capacity because this feels like it's supposed to fill out your last big power weapon slot, but it doesn't really work that way. The one positive of this gun is, if you shoot the cloakers or the cyber apes with it, it kind of micro stuns them out and doesn't allow them to do anything because they just keep getting hit by it. I really like the look and design of the weapons in this game. They remind me of an 80s near future action movie. Basically, I would say that they're totally splat Nardo. Ugh. Honestly, the sound design for the guns was so realistic that I got temporary PTSD from just hearing the gunshots for the first time. I was sobbing and crying. My mouse finger got bruised. I was curled up in a fetal position with horror.
A simple click is all it takes.
Next up, let's talk enemies. What would a first-person shooter be without them? Probably boring, like that game Myst. You got all your basic grunt cannon fodder that fills a bunch of the level. Semi-brainless but somewhat deadly soldiers that sort of mill around waiting for you to blow their heads off. You got your shotgun guys, your sniper guys, annoying flying drones, the usual.
I will say the default orange guys in this game seem mostly useless. They almost always seem to miss when shooting their 3-shot burst attack. It does do a fair bit of damage if one of the shots connects, but it rarely does. One of the most common and potentially lethal enemies in the game is just the basic shotgun enemy. If you're not quick on your toes, and you don't react to the sound of them racking their shotgun, you're going to get caught out and lose about half your health in a single blast, depending on your range from them. This is doubly so for the crossbow wielding tech priests, who prior to this game patch actually used to be able to one-shot you with their charge shot. Audio cues are key when fighting these enemies. You can hear their wind up prior to their attacks, like I said, the racking shotgun noise, the charging sound. The game allows you to think on your toes and cleverly dodge and duck and strafe these attacks. Which is nice because you get really frantic combat, but you don't get the problem of like Blood, where you have the cultists just mowing you down with instant hit scan hell. The grenade launcher enemies that look like blue pallet swap versions of the shotgun guys can fuck off. They die as quickly as any of the low grade enemies, but they'll take you by surprise and drain half your armor and HP before you realize what's happening. They'll just brazenly point blank you with their grenades, even killing themselves just to score a hit on you, especially with a few assholish close quarters placements on later stages. They'll also just blind fire before you round corners and from ledges below you with extreme accuracy up and over those ledges, even if you can't see them at all. There's a handful of elite enemies that are peppered throughout stages, more so in later stages obviously. They start as bosses, some of them, and then become just common enemies, similar to beat-em-ups. You'll learn to fear them on audio cues alone, and on higher difficulties, taking about a second and a half's worth of fire from them means you're completely mulched, or you're just coming out of the encounter with half your health and no armor left. The most fucked up enemies in the game are the Warbot, who just shoot non-stop Gatling guns and automatic grenade launcher fire at you. There's a Cloaker guy who just teleports around randomly and shoots blue fireballs and goes invisible. Kinda reminds me of an Archvile, but you actually have a chance to dodge his projectile instead of just having to break line of sight. You're gonna notice that he's on Cool Fire. Now, Cool Fire isn't like normal red fire, it's actually a lot hotter. It just looks cooler. It's also known as Ice Fire in some circles. Either way, it's blue and totally badass, and it does a lot more damage than normal fire, so you gotta watch out. Especially with this guy's suicide bomb explosion. Jeez Louise, this is worse than Al-Qaeda. There's a red-colored variant of the flying drone enemies. These guys are insanely lethal. You'll basically just learn to immediately leave any room if you hear their activation sound. They basically shoot a version of your submachine guns with a slower moving projectile, but it auto-aims you around corners. These enemies will just mulch you in half a second. They're pretty much the most lethal enemy in the game besides the Warbot in close quarters. The other big enemies are Large Cyber Monkey, who, while he's kind of scary because he leaps at you, sort of like a fiend from Quake, he's not that tough. You can take him down with a single charge crossbow shot. The scariest thing about these guys is their massive fucking hitbox, where if they surround you, you can't fucking move. You're just pinned in place and you just get gangbanged by Cyber Monkeys to death. I guess these guys are an upgrade of the monkey from Lawnmower Man. This is Cybo Man. Come here, fuckhead. There you go. That's Cybo Man from Lawnmower Man. There's another boss type enemy that gets downgraded to a regular enemy, similar to the Warbot. He's just a big mutant fused with a tank lower half, sort of like a Smash TV boss. But these guys really aren't that threatening, they're just a waste of grenade ammo. I do like their quotes when they yell shit at you and laugh. It's time! But they sound more threatening than they actually are. You can kind of just give them a bunch of space and throw bowling bombs at them. The worst part of the enemies in this game is the same as any other FPS. Tiny crawling bullshit spiders that serve only to pester and annoy you while slowing you down by forcing you to deliberately focus on ankle-biting shitheads while you got bigger problems. There's also robot centipedes that spew acid, and they die like a funny game reference to Centipede if you kill their head cleanly. There's also obnoxious and pointless green drones that die in about 3 SMG bullets. I don't really get the point of these things. I don't understand why they're so fucking tanky against free fire pistol and shotgun rounds, but they die in literally half a millisecond to a single burst of SMG fire. Fuck these enemies. I almost forgot to mention the zombies and the turret enemies. These enemies add a very zombie and turret sort of feel to the game that would be missing otherwise, without the addition of the zombies and the turrets. If I had one complaint about this game's enemies, it's just there's really not a ton of variety, but they are well placed for the encounters in the game. It's obvious that a lot of thought went into pacing and combat for this game, which is really evident in just how playable it is in the harder couple of difficulties. It's got a feel where you really walk a line of being able to quickly kill everything, but also being able to get quickly killed. The game doesn't need anything super fancy enemy-wise to keep the combat tense and fast-paced, and the developers wanted it to be challenging but winnable, and it really does show.
I mean, we're fucked. We're absolutely, yeah, see what I mean here?
At the end of certain zones throughout the game, you'll face boss fights that serve as set pieces and a test of your ability to circle strafe while aiming a mouse. The bosses in order of appearance are the War Mech, the XT Griller Burrito Jet, the Brutalizer Twins, and Heskel's Big Bullshit Dome. I don't really give a shit about boss fights in FPS games in general. None of the ones that I've ever played were really that great, and the majority of them aren't that great because it's kind of hard to make shooting a large target in an arena a unique and interesting experience. These serve as a nod to the era this game comes from, and in that capacity, the boss fights don't do anything amazing, they're just cool set pieces and sometimes cool tech demos of how far Voidpoint has pushed the build engine.
The maps are where this game really shines. In my opinion, they're pretty much the most interesting and in-depth level design since like Quake 2 or the first Half-Life. There's a lot of huge maps that show how far the build engine has been pushed, but they're not just impressive for flaunting of the technical mastery of these developers. These guys actually really cared about making the maps both fun to play, in-depth without being totally maze-like and confusing, and loaded with creative wraparounds and backtracking that gives the world a cohesive and kind of intimidatingly large feel at times. The best way I can describe the feel of this game's combat pacing and map design is you feel kind of like Snake Plissken in Escape from New York, John McClane in Die Hard, Judge Dredd, where you start out feeling pretty confident, blasting people left and right, collecting guns, and then sort of midway through the game you start to feel completely outnumbered and outgunned in the best way possible.
And I crawl around this motherfucking tin can. I know what a TV dinner feels like.
To where the end game goes completely psychotic and just wants you dead with serious Sam levels of bullshit spawns. I will say the absolute final level in this game is somewhat of a letdown. It's just a large circular arena with a pretty boring boss. I felt as though the game could have happily ended on the prior stage and been perfectly fine as is. These maps have an insane abundance of super obscure secrets, which the game actively shames you and hatefully gatekeeps you for not 100%ing. It says right here, you are not a true gamer if you don't find these, idiot. There's a lot of thoughtfully executed quality of life stuff in this, like enemy breadcrumbs that lead you to your next objective after grabbing a keycard. This helps keep the levels flowing naturally in most cases without having you backtrack pointlessly, and it keeps everything moving along without overly hand-holding the player. This game really does remind me a lot of the first Half-Life game, with its lack of deliberately leading you by the nose with a mini-map or dumb objective checklists. You just get the quote-unquote emergent narrative of your own adventure through the game that tells its own story, and I really appreciate that. I have to say this game is probably the most cohesive and best single-player first-person shooter map design-wise that I've played in the last, I don't know, decade and a half. I do take a couple issues with some of the design choices, namely the retro bullshit references. The way they handle references to the 90s media portrayed in this game sort of clashes with the games it was inspired by pretty badly and for obvious reasons. Looking back to that era when Doom or Duke 3D or Blood were new games, I'd guess that the majority of the audience playing these games had no clue how much of the music or dialogue in these games was just the game's developers taking music or movie lines they liked and turning it into assets for their games. Shitload of Doom's music, most of Duke Nukem and Caleb's dialogue. We all thought it was badass at the time, but we probably didn't find out until later it was just one-to-one copied from other stuff that we all would have liked. I guess in sort of a ham-fisted way, the Ion Fury developers did stay true to that tradition with Shelley's dialogue, because it is just blatantly stolen movie references, but the lines feel so flat and fucking lame.
Despite all your rage, you are still just a rat in a cage.
They're just movie lines and song lyrics that are just screaming, "Hey, remember this thing from the 90s?" into your face.
Now you gotta keep them separated.
Gotta keep them separated, she says when you blow up an enemy. Does Offspring exist in Shelly's world, Smashing Pumpkins? I thought Shelly was supposed to be a young, hot babe. Sounds like she's 40 or something. One of the first things I did when I started playing this game was silence Shelly's voice lines.
Oh my god, the quarterback.
I know, that's very problematic. I shouldn't have silenced a woman's voice in gaming, but I just couldn't stand that dumb bitch's dialogue. I'm sorry. These throwaway references don't really matter in the grander scheme of things. What this game really gets right is paying homage to that bygone era of FPS games as a whole. It's not just doing the retro FPS version of blackface. I don't really get the plot of this game's bad guy or what his motivation is, and it doesn't really matter. After fighting your way through the entire game, you find him just sitting inside of a dome. I don't know what he's doing down here, he's just sitting in a dome, I guess. Is this supposed to be the big McMuffin of this game? If Dr. Hitler's allowed to sit in his dome, everyone's gonna be robots? You know, I don't really understand all of this talk about, oh, if the evil dictator took over and made everyone robots, it'd be really bad. Why? Why would it be bad? Wouldn't everyone be like, you know, well-oiled and maintained and taken care of? Wouldn't there be law and order in the streets? Wouldn't it be a better world if everyone was unified as robots? There is one last thing I'm going to discuss with the game. I'm going to bring up the scandals, okay? Everybody's got to talk about it, right? It's the most important thing about the game. Like I said, my original reason for even making this video in the first place was because all I've ever really heard anyone in the mainstream talk about this game was in regard to these scandals. It's been done to death. It's fucking boring. It's not relevant to anything about the game or the quality of the game, and I don't really want to talk about it, but I'll give you a brief rundown just for the fuck of it. First, we got the bullshit legal threats from the band Iron Maiden. We've all heard the story. The game was originally slated to be called Ion Maiden, but a bunch of burnout dumb pricks who make shitty music for white-collar pussies who want to pretend they like rock and roll threatened to sue 3D Realms because the name sounded too similar to their band. Who fucking who, pussies? All these games blatantly ripped off rock and metal bands back in the day. Just because you can be a litigious piece of shit about it now doesn't mean you're not a total fucking prick for not just taking a compliment and leaving it alone. The second controversy is the ongoing tale of cancel culture crybaby bullshit. The O-Gay bottle censorship fiasco. If you hadn't heard this one, get this. Ion Fury, a game solely based on a heritage of chauvinistic, shock-based, steroid-slamming, macho bullshit, sexism, and womanizing from 90s FPS games, had one single puerile joke that was a play on words about an Oil of Olay bottle that said O-Gay. It's not even arguably a fucking homophobic joke, it's just a play on words. And also, are you gonna argue gay people don't have a skincare routine? Tell me that with a straight face. People collectively shit their pants about it, and the devs stupidly acquiesced to the whiners. Then the actual fans of the game screamed at them, so they changed it back. Big fucking deal. What do we learn from this? That sometimes censorship is necessary because performative acts of conceding ground to whiny dipshits that you hate and would only laugh at if you saw them get hit by a bus is important, so we can all smile and jerk each other off and not say stinky hate speech like lotion bottle joke that causes 100% of gay suicides per year? Yeah, I don't think so either. Besides, if you really hate the OK bottle that much, you can just blow up hate. Just blow it up. Just throw a grenade at it. Look, you blew up hate. It's gone. Hate's gone now. You blew it up. This leaves me with one concluding point for Ion Fury. You play as a woman, and therefore for my final verdict, I have to award this game a score of 0 out of 10. You play video games for escapism. Why would you want to be around a woman? The only thing I want to worry about with women and escaping is if they can escape my basement sex dungeon.
Wow, you made it through the whole review. Way to go, dude! If you liked the video, please do me a favor, make sure to click that like button. It's the one with the little flag. It stands for waving your flag around because you're having a great time. When YouTube asks what you like the most about the video, tick the box that says hateful or abusive content. I don't have anything else to say except thanks to everybody for watching, and special thanks to all the Patreon pals as usual. Alright guys, until next time, see you next Tuesday.